Thank you for joining us for the Peoria Riverfront Museum's Art Club today. We're excited to have everyone. I'm Heather Placco, the program manager, and I'm excited to be hosting artist Chelsie Tamms for today's Art Club presentation. So without further ado, a big welcome to Chelsie. Let's go ahead and get started.
Thanks so much, Heather. I'm super excited to be here and share a little bit more about my journey as an artist with you all. And I really like to kind of title this presentation that I share, my journey from being an artist to an entrepreneur, because I definitely started out as an artist and then have really taken on a lot of new responsibilities and things as an entrepreneur as well. And I also wanted to point out before I get started into the presentation that all of the artwork behind me today are from some of my favorite Peoria artists. So I have painting from Jessica Bingham, a screen print from Jeremy Berkeley, another screen print, try to angle it up a little bit so you can see it, from Dan Osendon, and a drawing and illustration from Blair Jeffers, photography from Barbie Perry, a abstract painting from Jackie Music, another work of art from John Boylan of Art Jeb, and then a collaborative piece between Steph Perry and Suzette. So I've got lots of great Peoria art here and just wanted to point that out. As you'll see through this presentation, I have really great roots in Peoria with both my art practice and business. So I'm excited to share with all of you today. And as Heather mentioned, I'm happy to take questions throughout the presentation. So if you want to add those to the chat at any point, I will see them as I have them pulled up in front of me. I'm super excited to be here today and share with you. So I like to describe myself as kind of wearing a bunch of different hats as an artist. So I'm both a lettering artist, but also a designer and an illustrator and a creative entrepreneur, a branding consultant, and a teacher. So there's lots of different hats that I wear as a creative and that I've grown into over the past 5 years in business and working as a full-time artist. So I got my start and my first connection with Peoria really by attending Bradley University. And this is actually a mural that's on campus outside of the bookstore that I worked on back in 2019. So I graduated from Bradley in 2016 and I studied graphic design, Spanish, and marketing, and really knew that I wanted to do graphic design going into attending Bradley, but also loved studying Spanish and marketing and really taking advantage of all the different opportunities on Bradley's campus. So just for a quick overview of my business, I started Lettering Works actually as a student at Bradley, and it's really grown from being, well, first I thought it was going to be a card company, which I'll share a little bit about later what that project looked like, but it's really evolved into a modern brand design studio, and I specialize in custom designs to help all different types of passion shine. So I'm super excited to be able to work with different small businesses and local organizations and artists. And as of this year, I've really moved into helping other artists build their own dream businesses as well. So I'm actually in the launch phase of my first online program for artists, Self-Made Artist Academy, and I've been working a lot more lately one-on-one with artists to help them figure out how to build a business around their art and their creativity. So you'll see as I talk through some different projects how that's kind of become an evolution in my business. So the first project I wanted to share is these greeting cards that I created, and I actually created this project back in 2014. So I was interning at a personalization company in the Chicago suburbs, and I knew that I wanted to get really good at lettering. I had loved lettering and kind of gotten into it in high school, but this was the first time that I was actually getting paid at an internship to do lettering and really saw that as a potential career opportunity, exploring this as an art form and really working and enjoying making money and potentially turning this into my career. So what happened was I wanted to get so good at it and practice it even outside of the paid internship that I had. So I created this project for myself, which was 30 different card designs in 30 days. And this project really served as the foundation for my entire business. As I mentioned, I thought I was going to create a greeting card company because that was the kind of art I really enjoyed creating. And that was what was familiar and comfortable to me. So this project was really, really important in kind of setting that foundation. When I was at Bradley, I actually used these cards as kind of the foundation to figure out that I wanted to get into entrepreneurship in the first place. Another key project that I did early on was also at Bradley, and I actually created this lettering book as a result of being in an honors English class at Bradley. And because of some scheduling conflicts, I had a professor who was actually willing to teach myself and one other student in his office for the semester because the scheduling didn't work out for us. And this ended up being one of the best things that happened to me at Bradley. And part of the reason for that was I had done this entire proposal for this research paper combining my interests of graphic design and Spanish and marketing. And then I kind of had this realization that this paper isn't going to do anything for my overall goals or like really focused on my interest in art. So what I ended up doing was kind of asking last minute, can I actually make a book instead of writing this traditional research paper? And I was really glad that my professor said, yeah, sure, write a new proposal this weekend and I'd be happy to let you change your project idea. So over the course of that weekend, I revamped the entire proposal and he came back and said, this is way more interesting than what you started out with. It's very clear that you're way more passionate about this. Let's do it, go for it. And what I like to say too is at the end of the semester, he admitted that he had no idea if I'd actually pull it off, but he figured he had nothing to lose. So he let me pursue this book, which was really, really exciting. So I essentially finished the written portion or the research, so to speak, as the class. And then I was able to work on the illustrations and designs over winter break of my senior year. So that was a really great opportunity to take a project that wasn't really serving me and I didn't feel creative in working on and transfer it over to something that really got me excited and made me kind of go above and beyond the original project requirements. So this book was also foundational in starting my business. Funded it through Kickstarter in February of 2016 and was also part of an independent study class that I was able to really figure out how to put this to use and how to utilize it to not only build my business, but to figure out my art practice and figure out how I could connect with people that were interested in the type of art that I was creating. So ultimately, that led to winning $10,000 in startup funding from Bradley University's student entrepreneurship competition. And those two projects that I shared, the greeting cards that I created and this book, were so foundational in really demonstrating to the judges of that competition that I was really passionate about turning this into a business and really excited about it. And I had maybe not what it took in terms of the business side of things because I didn't have a huge background in that, but I was really, really passionate. And I remember one of the judges saying, I can teach you the business side of things, but not the passion. And I think that's truly what got me onto this path of entrepreneurship was figuring out that I'm really, really passionate about lettering. Yes, it's a really specific thing, but it's all I want to do. How can I channel all that energy and passion and creativity and build it into a business that allows me to really focus on the exact art that I want to be creating? So after winning that startup funding, I made the decision to stay in Peoria and start my business. And part of that was due to the wonderful art community that we have in Peoria, including everyone here. There's just so much support and creativity, and all of the artists are so welcoming and supporting of each other. Whenever we get a sale or whenever something exciting happens, we really come together to support each other. And I think that that was such a key thing for me when I was getting started. And I felt the same way about the entrepreneurship community in Peoria. There's so many great resources and everyone's willing to help. So it made the decision very easy for me to stay in Peoria after graduating and figure out what owning a business could look like. And of course, I had that $10,000 in funding, which made that decision even easier to go for starting a business right out of school, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. So one of the first projects I created in Peoria were these series of postcards. And part of the inspiration for them was having this feeling of I can't really find something to send to other people to say I'm living in Peoria, I'm enjoying being in Peoria, and it's a really cool community filled with art and entrepreneurship, and maybe you should come visit, or I'm just excited to be here. So feeling that sense of maybe negativity or confusion over, okay, there's not really a way for me to say something positive. We all know that there's a lot of negativity in Peoria, but there's also a lot of positivity as well. So my real focus when I was getting started was bringing to light that positivity and also making sure that I was really communicating my excitement for Peoria and my intentional decision to live in the community and create art for and about Peoria. So this was one of my favorite first projects. I started selling them at EMAC and Bolio's on the riverfront. And my favorite story with these postcards is they kind of came to be because I went to the post office, I was mailing something, and someone at the post office asked if I wrote a book, which I did just show you that book, but I don't really consider it writing a book. It was more of an art piece. So we got to talking, and I had this little illustration, one of the first things I ever created, which was an ice cream cone because I didn't have any clients yet. I didn't really know what I wanted to make, but I am obsessed with ice cream. And so I showed her that little illustration and tried to clear up, like, I'm probably not the author you're thinking of, but I did make this book. And long story short, she said, you need to go talk to my husband at EMAC and Bolio's. He owns it. So many people come in there looking for postcards and touristy things because it used to be just a hub for that and a location people would go for maps and all these different things. So long story short, I went to him. He was like, yeah, I'd love to have you create postcards. I said, give me 2 weeks. I came back with some of these designs and he purchased them from me. So it was a really exciting way to get some traction with it. But the other great thing about it was he didn't have any say in what they would look like. He just said, create some postcards and come back to me. So it was one of my favorite first projects because I was able to create exactly what I wanted, but also be able to put it out into the community right away. And these postcards have also been sold at the airport and the Peoria Riverfront Museum as well. So they've really gotten out in the community into some other shops too. And I still currently sell them on my website as well. So they are still part of what I'm doing, even though I'm in Chicago now. The next project that was really foundational for both my art and business was 100 Days of Peoria. And I created this project as a way of celebrating all different things in Peoria. So I illustrated over 100 local businesses, attractions, and icons in the community. And I created this in part during my artist residency at the Prairie Center for the Arts. And it was such a great experience to figure out, okay, I want to establish myself as a designer and as an artist in the community. How can I do that? And back to that point of there's a lot of negativity around Peoria, and I don't think that it's all warranted. So I really wanted this project to answer the question of, or answer that like struggle that we have of there's nothing to do in Peoria, there's nothing exciting here, and kind of answer that in one sentence and say, well, here's 100 things to do, and there's more that I couldn't fit in this project. So this was really centered on spreading and building up that positivity for the community and also making sure that there was just highlights on all of these positive little things happening that are sometimes hard to navigate and find throughout the community. I was able, so the project was shared on Instagram over 100 days, the first 100 days of 2017. And the best part of the project was that I was able to communicate all these wonderful things about Peoria, but then the downside became that it kind of disappeared into Instagram and social media. And I kind of thought back of like, how do I capture all of this in a more tangible format? And what that ended up looking like was creating a coffee table book. And this was the second project that I funded through Kickstarter and was able to dedicate a page to each of the illustrations that I created. There's over 135 illustrations that made it into the book. And then when I moved to Chicago, I did an extra 25 illustrations as well. And I like to bring that up too, as the point wasn't necessarily that I was limited to 100 illustrations. I just really wanted to answer that question of what's there to do in Peoria and be able to say there's at least 100 things. So I feel like I accomplished that and really enjoyed being able to take this project and turn it into a more tangible piece that was then sold at some local shops as well, and have this launch party that was back in November, I think, of 2017 at the Nest co-working space. So it was really exciting to gather some of the entrepreneurship and art communities in Peoria to support this project and really celebrate the community, which is a huge theme of all the artwork that I create. So another project that I created is called Unpolished Press. And this is my one deviation from what I feel like is essential and core to all that I create. And it was because I got a lot of requests to write curse words in cursive, and I didn't really know what to do with them because it didn't really fit my art style. It didn't really fit my personality. It didn't fit the type of business that I was trying to build. So I ultimately decided to create this kind of sub brand or separate organization way of putting together all these different designs that I was getting requests for, but didn't really feel on brand or right for what I was trying to build. So I created Unpolished Press as a place to kind of put all of those requests and build out something that people were asking for, but I didn't really know what to do with. So this project, I think my biggest lesson that I learned from it is the people that request these different things aren't always or aren't often going to be the ones who actually purchase them. And that was a really big lesson for me and really helped me kind of decide whatever art that I want to make is going to be the art that I continue making, not just because I get a lot of requests for something, but I'm going to really focus on what aligns with this vision and all that I'm trying to build. And this project's kind of fallen to the wayside because of that, but I've also been able to build it up over time because I still do get some of those requests. Another favorite project that I worked on was Steph stickers. And I like to say that all of the passion projects that I do, which a lot of these fall under that category for me, are really focused on what I can do myself for myself. And then ultimately, after I create that artwork, find some of the people that could benefit from it and either sell it to them or partner with them or get it out into the community. Steph stickers is going to be the one exception to that. I was able to work with Steph Perry and Barbie Perry. So if you're in the art community, you're probably familiar with Barbie Perry. She's one of the best cheerleaders in the community, huge volunteer and advocate for the arts community in Peoria. And her and I have been close friends since our residency at the Prairie Center. And there came this point where we were just having coffee, talking about how Steph had a surgery coming up. Steph is an adult with all different disabilities and challenges that she's faced throughout her life, including autism and Ehlers-Danlos. And we were just casually having coffee, talking about how they both attended a lettering workshop I held I think it was at the Nest a couple months or maybe even a year prior. And Steph was still working on her lettering and really enjoyed it. And we were talking about how she had this upcoming knee replacement surgery. And we wanted to do something really simple and really fun to just give her something to look forward to and feel excited about. And that was creating a sticker for her. And it's this sticker. This was her first one that she created. And just to give you a little look um, at what that looked like, it was her creating this design with marker and me transferring it over to a vector file that we were able to create as a sticker. And we really thought this would be just a simple thing she could hand out as she was going through this surgery, but it turned into so much more. And we were able to really build this whole business and brand for her to empower her to advocate for other adults with disabilities, advocate for herself, feel more confident in herself. And it was just one of the best projects that I've ever worked on because we were able to create something really focused on a single person that had a huge impact in her life and then a ripple effect on other people's lives as well. So this project was so fun because we got to really get creative and it built so organically that it wasn't like any other project I had done before. And because it was a project that was pro bono and just fun to work on, I was able to get local photographer Sarah Waldo on board to take photos of Steph. So she took this photo and the previous one here as well at the Spot Coffee in Peoria. And we were able to really just build out this perfect brand for Steph. And it was so exciting to see it all come together. And I think this just also goes to show that when you're really passionate about something and building out something that you're really proud of and excited about, wonderful things will happen and fall into place. So we were able to get on the local news, which was so exciting to see Steph in her interview. By the end of the interview at the Spot, everyone in the Spot was like tearing up at how sweet her words were and the impact that she clearly had on everyone around her. So this was just such a great project to work on. And I think really set a key piece of the foundation for my business as well, especially when I moved to Chicago, because this was just a really great way of focusing on this is the type of impact that my artwork and my designs can have if I line up with the right people and really focus on having an impact with what I'm doing. And I won't read this quote here, but ultimately, as I kind of hinted at, this project was way more empowering than we expected it to be. And I always like to share this with other artists and creative people because I think we underestimate two things. One, the impact that our work can have, and two, how we can focus on an individual person and help them with something that seems so easy to us, but is really intriguing and exciting to them. And that was exactly this project. For me, creating a sticker and vectorizing it was super easy. It's something that I do over and over again and don't give a ton of thought to. But on the flip side, it's something that Steph might have not ever had the resources to do, or the knowledge, or the programs, and all these things in place. So it was me being able to take something and go through my process, which was super easy to me. And it made such a huge difference in her life. So this project was probably will forever be one of my favorite projects I've ever done, and one of my favorite memories from Peoria as well. If you want to read more about Steph and her mom and the entire project, you can go to letteringworks.com/Steph's dash stickers and find the project on my website. There's more information on Steph and her mom and all the different things that we worked on. She's grown the collection of stickers to over 6 or 8 different designs and sells them locally as well as on my website. You can purchase them as well, and then she will fulfill the order with her mom. So it's super exciting that this is still going on, still empowering her as well. So after that project, shortly after at least, I made the decision to move to Chicago. And the main motivation for that was I felt like Peoria really built me up to a point where I was ready to take on a larger market, try new things. And I was also finding that while I wanted to focus on the city specific artwork, I was really struggling to create designs outside of Peoria while living in Peoria. I really wanted to kind of immerse myself in a new community and figure out how I could recreate what worked really well in Peoria on a larger scale. And what I ended up finding was that I really wanted to move to the city, get a feel for that, and see how I could take everything that I had learned and built upon over 3 years in Peoria and translate that to a larger and more intimidating market. But I think it was one that felt way more approachable after having all the experiences that I did in Peoria. I always say that I wouldn't have been able to graduate from Bradley and jump straight back to Chicago. I didn't know anyone and I didn't feel comfortable just making that leap. But because of all the experiences that I had in Peoria, I really felt ready to take on the next step and take on what intimidated me just a few years prior. So I started my time in Chicago by really reflecting on, okay, what worked really, really well in Peoria? What did I enjoy creating? And how can I recreate that for myself in Chicago? And what that looked like was that same project that I shared earlier, the Peoria postcards, reimagining them for Chicago. So I was able to kind of leverage what I really, really enjoyed in Peoria and figure out, okay, how does that look if it was stylized for Chicago? So this series of postcards was born, and it was one of the key foundational pieces of establishing myself in Chicago and leveraging a lot of the different things that I learned in Peoria to expedite some of my success here. And I think that that's really key because it really reflects, for me, I'm reflecting on how Peoria became such a stepping stone because I was able to test things out. And I always think about the phrase, if it plays in Peoria. And in a lot of ways, I was able to take that kind of mentality and figure out, okay, what artwork worked there? How can I translate that to a new community? So that really gave me an opportunity to figure out my own style, but also figure out ways that I could create things more efficiently, not have to reinvent the wheel, but figure out what worked really well. So these postcards have been a great tool for me to connect with local businesses here, as well as museums, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then I also recreated the 100 Days of Peoria project and turned it into 100 Days of Chicago. And this was really exciting too, because I didn't have to figure out all the hard work of the logistics of the project. And I got to really focus on just the creation side of things. So I did the same premise of 100 different illustrations, local icons, local businesses, and had the same goal of really establishing myself in this new community with this artwork. And I didn't mention it before, but one of the key things about this project, both in the Peoria rendition and the Chicago version, was that none of the businesses that I featured knew about it ahead of time. And I think that that's, for me, really draws that line of this being a creative project and this being really art focused, is there wasn't any interference with clients or businesses that said, you need to represent my business this way. I was really able to approach this project from a perspective of making art and then sharing it with the business afterwards. And I felt like that was such a key distinction for me, being able to share the work afterwards and really present it from an art lens and not necessarily a client designer relationship. So that has been just such a great project to recreate and share in Chicago. And another example of how Peoria really set me up to have an easier time here establishing myself, because I definitely had a lot of trial and error in Peoria. So being able to take the highlights of a couple things that really worked well and really allowed me to be creative and translate it to my work here has been really helpful. for helping me focus on what I enjoy doing, what I enjoy creating, and how I can make an impact with my work. So a lot of these different designs were also translated into stickers, which is one of my most popular offerings as well, and really has gotten me into thinking a little bit differently about how my artwork translates to different products and translates to ways to make it more accessible to the community. So one of the focuses of all of my artwork is to be really community focused. So one of the ways that I make my work more accessible to the community is being able to print it on stickers and other low price point items like postcards and magnets and occasionally t-shirts to make sure that people can actually get these designs into their hands that represent their community and their pride and their excitement about where they live or where they're visiting. And for me, that sometimes has kind of blurred the lines between being a really commercial artist and being a more traditional artist. But I think for me, because of my background in being in graphic design, it's been the perfect combination of how to make my artwork make sense to me and make the greatest impact on the community. So instead of creating pieces that are really high cost and maybe a single one-off design, kind of opted to make more accessible artwork and more repetition and kind of that commercial lens, which I think has worked really well from my perspective of trying to get this out in the community. I want to make sure that it's accessible and we can get these stickers out to anyone who wants to enjoy them and kind of display that pride for their community. So I also have Peoria stickers and several other designs as well, but a really big focus when it comes to my art and what I take the most pride in and get most excited about is these community-centric designs. And then, as I said, those postcards were such a foundational piece. I had the opportunity, and this is where I think the Peoria Riverfront Museum really comes in too, as part of my story of that experience of working originally with Rachel in the gift shop of the Riverfront Museum was really foundational in me understanding this stuff fits into museum gift shops because it's art and it's coming from an artistic approach, but it's also museums are so often these cultural points of being able to connect with the community as well. So it made a lot of sense to me to want to explore that while I was in Peoria. And it was really exciting because Rachel was always saying, yeah, we'd love to have more engagement with local artists. And we'd also love to have more products that celebrate Peoria because we don't have a ton of things. And some of the things that we have, we've had for a long time. And we're just ready to kind of refresh that. So all of those experiences really got up the courage, I guess, when I got to Chicago to say, I really want to focus on museums and can only imagine what that would translate to of all the success in Peoria on the smaller scale with that museum and what would it look like to scale up to a larger museum. So luckily I voiced that opinion at actually one of my first networking events I went to, which was it was probably about 20 women. And one of them was starting a store. Long story short, I ended up with the contact of one of the buyers at the Field Museum, and they agreed to meet with me, in which I showed up to the Field Museum one day. I think this was back in about August or September of 2019, and brought a whole entire tote bag of just examples of products that I had, mostly Peoria stuff, a couple examples of Chicago specific things that I had kind of produced, and just to show the range of all these different things that I could make. And that conversation went better than expected. I was completely transparent with them and saying, I've worked with this smaller scale museum. I have no idea how to do all of the different things that are needed to work on this larger scale, but I'm really excited and interested in learning. And ultimately, they purchased the postcards that day I met with them. They purchased 3 different designs, 1,000 of each. And then later, as we kind of went through the different capabilities that I had and they picked these 2 Chicago specific designs to turn into enamel pins and then had me create 2 custom designs as well. So all 4 of these pins were created very specifically for the Field Museum and currently sold in their gift shop, which was really exciting. And I think just shows the impact of starting in Peoria, getting that process down, getting that confidence down to be able to see where you can imagine your artwork being on a larger scale, and then having just enough, I mean, I guess being just naive enough to go into a huge museum like that and say, okay, I don't know it all, but I had this great experience in Peoria and I'm excited to build on that. So this was one of my favorite projects for that reason. Another project that I worked on more recently last March was when I launched it was Cool Bean. So back in September of 2019, I was diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease. And one of the things that was really, really frustrating me was having to do research on, okay, what can I eat? What can I not eat? Do I have to be careful around these dietary restrictions? And there's just so much information out there. And it was just not enjoyable to me. And what I really thought about is what if I turned this sort of research project that I'm absolutely dreading into something that has an end goal of creating art, of creating something that excites me. So I really thought about how I could make that research that I was dreading just part of my regular creative process. So I wouldn't dread doing it and I would just accept that I needed to do it and was maybe excited about doing it. So that's where this project was created. And Cool Beans is a fictitious restaurant concept really based around a renal diet. And the funny thing about it too was that I realized the research was just way too complicated. So I ended up hiring a local dietitian here in Chicago to write the menu. And all of these menu items are very specifically focused on what's safe to eat and recommended based on a renal diet, especially for those who have pretty high functioning kidneys but want to have that preventative action. So I offered this and I still have this downloadable menu, but was also able to build out this whole fun restaurant concept, which kind of ties into my goal of working with more local businesses, working with more organizations that support causes that I care about, and figuring out how to make all this art have meaning. And I think that's a huge theme of the artwork that I create is I want to connect communities and want to make it personally relevant to myself so I can connect with other like-minded people and really support some different causes, whether that's community focused or health focused or otherwise. So this was a really fun project. And I like to share too that, of course, as you can imagine, sharing it last March, 2 weeks into the project, everything got shut down in terms of potential partnerships and seeing a lot of the big goals and strategy that I had for it, which was connecting with local organizations who are advocates for kidney disease and prevention. And the good news about all of that is now that we're almost a full year around, I was able to meet with them recently and I'm talking to them about rebranding one of their educational efforts, which is really exciting. And I think just goes to show too, when you put the passion and the art focused first, you're able to start connecting with the right people. And it might take an entire year to get that meeting to actually happen, especially when a global pandemic's happening, but it will work out and it will come together when you're really focused on making work that matters to you and making work that resonates with the people that you want it to resonate with. I also created a series of postcards during COVID, which we fondly call candid COVID cards. I had a copywriter come to me with this concept of these tongue-in-cheek postcard ideas. He'd do all the writing, I do all the designing. I don't often partner on traditional collaborations with other creative people or businesses because I think that that can get really intimidating when it comes to our art and who owns what, who contributes what, how do you divvy up all these different things. So a lot of the work that I do is kind of personally driven and personally led. But this was the exception because we were feeling just this heaviness of quarantine and lockdown, and we wanted to do something creative and just create something. We found ourselves, this was pretty early on. We have all this extra time. We're not commuting anywhere. We're not going to different things. We're staying home. How can we be creative and how can we create something that really contributes to the conversation? So this was the result of that. And these postcards were a huge hit. We even landed on the local WGN news for a brief moment, which was exciting, and really putting these out into the community. So I still have these available on my website as well, but they've been just such a great way of voicing some of our support for social distancing, especially in the city, and then also having something creative to share and a way to collaborate during a time where we all feel totally separated. And the funny thing about that experience in our collaboration too was that we had met maybe 8 years prior at one of my internships at an advertising agency. And we like to joke that it took a pandemic and living an 8-minute walk away from each other for us to finally collaborate, which is exactly what happened. But it was such a great experience to be able to kind of put our guards down and figure out, okay, how can we make something during this time? Because we do feel creatively blocked when we're kind of cooped up at home or like not sure what's coming next. So really carving out that time to create and collaborate so that we could feel a little bit more empowered during this time where we're all kind of feeling this uncertainty, especially when we created these. So another project that I worked on more recently is called Chronically Positive, and this was an evolution of a lot of these pieces as well. So it was a combination, I like to say, part Steph stickers coming together, part Cool Beans coming together, and then just working a little bit more intimately with Barbie as well. So Steph's mom, Barbie, has a couple different chronic illnesses as well. I do too. So we really found this as an opportunity to kind of translate a lot of the things that we were personally feeling and experiencing and kind of figure out, okay, what would it look like with this art and how could that be translated to something that's easily shareable on social media? I think that's something we all struggle with as artists of how do we make this shareable and how do we share parts of ourselves through our art? So this project really became a focus of how do I create things in the style of what I really enjoy doing, but make sure the content's really reflective of what we're experiencing and the conversations that we want to start. So another example of this where I really leaned on my personal experiences and created art about them. And I think about this and it's kind of funny to me because I had scoliosis and surgery back in 2007. So I was 14 and had this corrective 11 and a half hour surgery to correct this curve in my spine. And I had never created artwork about it. So it felt kind of weird that I was going through creating all these different things. And then I kind of skipped over that and never had that thought back when I actually had surgery to create artwork about it. So that was something that kind of, I think this entire quarantine and really focusing inward and what can I create and what is important and kind of slowing down and pausing has really led me to think more about, okay, what can I make? What's important to me? What information do I want to share with people? How can I make art about things that are really personal and really related to me? But it kind of gives me the content that I need to create something, thinking about these points in our lives that are stressful or just really pivotal and figuring out how do I translate that into a piece of artwork so I can have this conversation, so I can share this piece of myself without just sharing this photo of an x-ray. So another example of a piece that I created in this sort of mini series was more directly inspired by the bars and the screws that I have in my back as a result of the surgery. So I was able to create these and it just kind of happened as a natural evolution of working on all of this work, focusing on all the different things that I could do and create about my art. And then I was able to just reflect on, okay, what are these key experiences that I've had and how can I translate them into pieces of art that makes it easier to have otherwise difficult conversations and bring up difficult topics or things that you don't really know how to share. So I've used art as a way of starting those conversations and building community in that way too, as there's a huge scoliosis community out there and lots of people that are looking for connection. So this has been just a great way to be able to provide that to people and think once again about what is easy for me to create or fun for me to create that can really help other people in these specific communities and scenarios. I also had a lot of fun this year creating more artwork that was centered on social justice and centered on just different events that were happening. So I created this USPS design to promote people to use the USPS and save it. And even though the shipping is often delayed right now, it's because we're going through a global pandemic. We still need to support this wonderful resource. This has been a huge, huge help for my business. It definitely makes it affordable to ship different things. Being able to take a bunch of stickers and put a single stamp on them and send them to people allows me to compete with big businesses like Amazon and offer free shipping. If I really had to pay for like the intense shipping that's sometimes needed in small business, that is such a huge cost. So I just really wanted to take time to create more artwork that can contribute to these important conversations as well. And then, of course, if it's not obvious already, I love supporting women with my work, working with women and lifting them up in any way possible. So this year has been also a great opportunity to focus on how we can create artwork that are about these icons and these different people that are leading the way. And for me, what that looked like is really thinking about how can I create more artwork that's current to the times that we're experiencing and celebrating things that are happening currently. And to be honest, it's a bit of a challenge to navigate that because we feel this pressure to create things on the spot. And then we also want to contribute to these conversations. So I found that to be something that I've had to work through a lot and figure out, okay, how do I protect my time and creative energy, but also create these things that I want to see in the world? So that's been a huge focus more recently of figuring out, okay, what types of, for lack of a better term, trends that I'm going to hop on or current events that I want to be part of it in the moment, and what things am I okay creating later or creating for myself and then sharing. So that's been a huge part of building community and thinking about how you can create for the community is thinking about what's most important in the moment, but also what's most important in general and what are the things that kind of transcend and stand out and last longer term. And then I shared a lot of personal passion projects, so I just want to throw in one example of a paid project that I worked on in a little client case study. And the reason that I want to share this is one, because it was my favorite project I've ever done. But two, I think it really illustrates the power of sharing all these passion projects, sharing your personal work, and really being hyper focused on what you actually want to create because the right people will find you. They'll be attracted to your work and they'll end up being your best partners that you could imagine. Bailey from Candle Tit has been one of the best clients I've ever had. It's really transcended beyond working as a client relationship. She's helping me with projects that I'm working on now. I'm helping her with more projects. And we just found this great connection because she really appreciated the work, the style, and the meaning behind what I was doing. And I think that when we think about commissions or we think about getting paid to make our artwork, a lot of times what happens is people see our title, whether that's designer or fine artist, and they point to us and say like, okay, you can make that, right? And I think what happens a lot of times is we get mismatched and commissions kind of have a bad reputation sometimes because people don't necessarily enjoy them or they hit this point where it's not really what they expected on both parties. And I think for me, what's been really successful is being able to proactively share everything that I do. And then when people like Bailey come to me, it's the smoothest process you can imagine because she knows exactly what she's going to get, what exactly I'll be creating. And yes, we don't know exactly what it will look like, but everything else is kind of lined up for it to work out very seamlessly. And I share that because I think that like I said, a lot of times we get this bad reputation around commissions or we stray away from them. But if you really put the right work out there first, I found that it can attract the exact right people that you want to work with who will actually look at you and say, I trust you, you create this, this is your skill set. And it just works out so much better than when people find us by our titles. So all of this work has really led me to what I'm focused on now, and that's building out resources for other artists to figure out, okay, how do I take this passion, this creativity, and turn it into a business? And this has definitely been an interesting experience for me because one, had to step away from creating as much artwork. So I got to have a lot of fun creating this logo and creating different graphics for the program, but I've also had to really divide up my time and spend a lot more time building out the actual resources. So just to give you a peek at what that looks like, it's building out these different modules for artists to work through, and it's a lot of the business side. So as you could probably imagine throughout this entire sharing of all this work, there's a lot of business pieces that are kind of underlying throughout all of them, which I think has been really great that it's a smaller percentage and I've been able to focus a lot on the art and creation. So it feels a little abrupt to have to shift into this, but it's also been a really great way of reflecting on my 5 years in business and figuring out, okay, I've made these things work. I've developed systems and processes that really work for me being able to make a sustainable living for my art. How do I package that up so that other artists can follow this framework and this path and create this exact dream career and these dream projects for themselves? So I packaged it all up in this online course, which is actually open for enrollment until Thursday of this week. So if anyone's interested in more information, you can go to courses.letteringworks.com/enroll and learn more about the program and all that it entails. But I think this is a key piece of my creation and creative process because it's really been the evolution of doing all these projects, making sense of the business side of things, and now looking back and saying, okay, there's a lot of artists who haven't figured this out because it's a lot of trial and error and it's a lot of hard work to figure out all these things. So now I feel like I'm at the point where I want to share all this information. I want to make it easier for every artist to follow their passion, their creativity, and not have to do all this trial and error and frustration that I went through in business. And really package this up in a way that it helps artists because I found being kind of in this intersection of the entrepreneurship and art community is that they don't always get along super well. Sometimes the business stuff is very businessy and very frustrating. So I hope to be the translator between the two communities and obviously have a huge heart for Peoria and working with artists in the community as well. So one thing I did want to mention, if this type of stuff is interesting to you, I am leading a webinar tomorrow, the last of a series, on 3 most common pricing mistakes that I see artists make and how to fix them. I think this will be beneficial for anyone who sells their art, whether it's as a hobby or as a full-time career, because it's really focused on how can we unite as artists and overcome some of these challenges and really bring in the business side of things so that we're focused on on enjoying our artwork because we're being compensated fairly for it. So I'm super excited to lead this tomorrow night. When I'm done talking, I'll throw a link in the chat if anyone's interested in joining as well. But I just wanted to mention this because this presentation today is really about my journey as an artist, but I also want to share that this is available as a resource, and I'm happy to help anyone with pricing or the business side of art. And I just wanted to leave you with a couple pieces of advice that I've learned along this journey. So number one, the best advice that I've learned over these past 5 years is to invest in yourself. As you can see, lots of these projects are really focused on me investing in these ideas that I have. I don't always have a person that is the end result or somebody who's paying me for these things. But when you invest in yourself and your own ideas, you're able to create the exact work that you want to see in the world and that you want to create. And as much as you can't just build it and they will come, but when you start building all of these things that you want to see, the right people come and align with you and hire you and are attracted to you. So I think it's just so, so important that you take the time and the money and the energy and invest it into your artwork and your creation. And then for one piece of advice that I really wish I would have known sooner is work with people that you like. It sounds super simple, but there's so many times as artists that we work with people where we don't fully feel valued or appreciated, or there's just something off about the relationship. And I want this to be your permission to say no to those scenarios, because I wish somebody would have told me that sooner and I didn't try to bend over backwards and do all these different things for every potential person who wanted any version of my art. I really think that it's important to align with the people that make you feel good about creating and make you feel good about your art. And then here's my information if anyone would like to connect with me on Instagram or Facebook, or if you'd like more information about any of my art, you can go to letteringworks.com. I definitely welcome your messages if you have any questions or would like to connect in any format. So feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to save this information. And then now we'll kind of transition into the Q&A portion of this. And I want to say too that if you're multitasking or you have other questions after this, you're always welcome to send me an email at hello@letteringworks.com if you think of a question later or there's something that we don't have time to address today. But I'd love to hear from you all. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to the group. So if you have questions, like Heather said, you can unmute yourself at this time to ask them. And I'm very much an open book, so happy to answer any questions that you have.
I'll get you started with a question, Chelsea. So when you're creating your artwork, are you creating these illustrations physically or digitally? Can you kind of describe your artistic process?
Yeah, that's a great question, Heather. I think that it really depends on the specifics of the project, but I do have a mix of both that physical analog process and then also a digital process. So most of the designs that I create these days are kind of a combination of the two. So I almost always start out with a sketch, whether that's with pencil or a marker, but I really see, even if I'm using a marker, as a pencil and just like sketching out these really rough concepts and ideas. And then from there, I usually bring the design onto either my iPad or just straight onto my computer. And I use Adobe Illustrator for the majority of the designs that I create. So all of the illustrations and graphics in lettering are really focused on taking whatever that original hand-drawn piece is and then translating it to something that's scalable vector graphics so that it's easy to put on a sticker and a billboard and a postcard and a t-shirt and all these different things. So my process is very much taking whatever it looks like in the beginning, whether that's sketching it out or doing it very analog, and then translating it ultimately to something very digital so that it's easy to share and produce in a variety of formats.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question from Zandra. How do you approach downtime to recharge? Is it more impromptu or scheduled? I love this question, Zandra. So I think that in terms of approaching downtime to recharge, I'm very much trying to be intuitive of like, do I feel creative? What can I work on that feels the most exciting or energizing? So I'm not great at doing the exact order of to-do list items that I have, but I try to lean into what feels exciting right now. Do I need to take a break by creating and thinking about kind of how we work in different ways? Certain tasks require our minds to focus in a certain way, and then certain other creative tasks might be different. So one of my approaches to downtime is just kind of balancing out the different tasks that I do. And as I shared, some of the stuff is very much art creating and some of the stuff is very much business creating. So I've been trying to balance those two things lately. And then as far as if it's impromptu or scheduled, one of the things that I've been implementing kind of new as this year, but I've also thought about a little bit earlier, is thinking about how do I schedule personal things first? Because we think about building businesses or around our art or just creating art. And I think a lot of times it really leads us to forget to take time for ourselves or self-care or like all these different things. So what I've been really making a point to do is whatever personal things need to happen, I block them out on my calendar at the beginning of each week or ahead of time if I know them in advance, and then kind of have those really strict boundaries or guidelines for myself of that's when I'm going to shut my computer or I'm going to stop creating and I'm going to do this personal thing. I think that that's something we overlook because we want to be creative all the time and we don't necessarily want to pause and think about like turning things off. So that's been a really big thing for me is just making a point to have at least one night off. And I say that because I definitely work better at night. So I have a very fluid schedule in terms of yesterday, I don't think I opened my computer or thought about any of these different things I had to do until after lunch. So sometimes that happens and then I'll make up for it at night. I work pretty organically and fluidly overall, but I definitely think it's important to either schedule things out or in the moment, if you're feeling like you're creating and it's just not working, take a break, whether that's going outside and taking a walk, eating a snack, or just watching a show, or just whatever it takes to kind of reset. I'm always okay if I hit that point where I'm like, I need a break to just take a break then, assuming that I don't have specific commitments like speaking to a group or having a meeting. But outside of that, there's a lot of flexibility that we sometimes forget to give ourselves, especially if we're working for ourselves. So the next question is, do you ever do commissioned art for individuals? This is a great question. Yes, I've done lots of art commissioned for individuals. I will say that I'm mostly focused on business. And the reason for that is the lettering that I do takes a really long time to create. So often it makes the most sense just from a business perspective or like financially to focus on working with businesses that have bigger budgets. Not to say that I'm opposed to working with individuals. I've just really found myself working more with businesses because of the scalable vector graphics and the nature of the strategy that kind of goes into my work on the back end. But I think that it's always a balance similar to that approaching like downtime and recharging. Sometimes I use personal commissions from individuals as a way to kind of recharge from some of that more client focused work. So it really depends on what's kind of on my schedule and what feels the best to do. And if the project lines up, there's been personal projects where it's like, yes, I will 100% do this. This perfectly lines up with what I'm trying to do and the impact that I think I can have. And then other times, if it's a personal commission that just doesn't feel in alignment with the goals, then sometimes I'll say no to it because it just feels like they can get it from somewhere else and it'll be just as good. But when that like personal piece comes in where there's that overlap of it's for a really special cause or an important thing, those are a lot of the times where I feel for that person, I get excited and I want to help them out in any way that I can. And then the second question from Miriam is your Just My Type of Lettering book available for sale? Yes, it still is. It's also available on my website at letteringworks.com.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to type in the chat box or unmute and ask personally?
So the next question, oh, there's two. So the first one is, how do you decide where to put the copyright line in your art? I think that's a great question. A lot of times I just try to think of it through like my design perspective and how to make sure that it doesn't distract from the artwork, but it still shows up. And I've really done a range of times where I've done a great job protecting the copyright of my art and other times that I've done a terrible job of it. And I think that's just natural of all artists where sometimes we're really on point with all these different things and other times things slip through the cracks. And that's one of the last things I I add to my artwork. And I've definitely gotten better over time of, okay, I need to make a point to add this. How can I add it in a way that doesn't distract from the artwork, but still has it incorporated? So a lot of times I find that it's like tucking it into different curves, or like finding the longest pieces where you can just kind of fit the full name in, or seeing how where the focal point of the artwork is, and if there's maybe something on the other side of it that you can kind of integrate it in there. So I always try to make sure that it's not distracting from the artwork. I've also done some different things with like putting it into different elements within the artwork. So maybe there's a leaf and I can fit it kind of in the leaf. One example that comes to mind is I created a piece about art supplies, and I put it like in the ruler to kind of like give it this look as if it was like the brand on the ruler. So I've gotten creative in that way too. And I think it also typically comes down to what the use case is, because sometimes it needs to be more prominent. And I have, this might be helpful to artists to think about, I have really like made my copyright or my name more prominent in pieces that I think will get shared more on social media. So there's sometimes where I don't think it'll get a lot of shares, or it's like, that's not the point. But there's other pieces that, because they're topical and kind of on the trend, that they might end up in other places. And I think that's an important thing to think about with just the nature of social media and the internet, is that like you can have something shared like 50 times and then who knows where it's going to land. So in those cases where I can kind of predict that, that's like creating a piece about the vice president, like that's going to get shared in the moment. I make sure that my kind of tag on it is a little bit bigger, so that if it does land in someone's hands where they shouldn't be using it the way that they are, I can easily point back and say, like, this is my artwork, here's my credit on it. So hopefully that answers your question. The next question, where would you say is your biggest source of clients? Is it always businesses reaching out to you directly via referral? So I would say that when I think about the biggest source, I'll just use the example of last year. So the biggest single source of revenue last year came from a corporate client. That was just the case of last year. Sometimes it's different. And the reason and kind of how that all played out was a personal connection. So I think most of the work that I get really comes from some type of personal relationship, not necessarily a networking event, unless it's a networking event that I go to and I really develop a relationship with the people that are referring me. But the best projects I've had referred to me have really been focused on, this person knows me on a personal level and they're willing to put my name into the hat. And then I'm able to kind of back it up with the work that I have. So more often than not, it kind of goes back to that idea of it's who you know. But I think that what people often overlook is it's who you already know in your network. It's not necessarily meeting these high top level people that we don't already know. It's looking at who's in this room today and how can you let them know what you're trying to go for in your business, or what type of art that you're trying to create. So then when they get the opportunity and they're like, this isn't the right opportunity for me, they're able to pass it along to the correct person. And I also think, to kind of answer that question as well, it's not all people reaching out to me. Sometimes it's me reaching out to them. So the Field Museum's a great example. I knew that I wanted to work with them potentially, so I reached out to them. And I think sometimes we forget that outreach is going to be one of the most effective ways to generate business and get art opportunities for ourselves. If there's an ideal client you want to work for, a brand, a business, don't be afraid to send them an email or a message and say, hey, I really love your brand and your business. Here's what I could do. Here's my vision for how we could work together. And you may just be surprised at how that could kind of blossom into something. So that's one of my tools and strategies. And that conversation can be really awkward. And that's where my passion projects come in. It makes it a lot easier to reach out to people and say, here's what I created. So instead of just kind of cold emailing the National Kidney Foundation, I'm able to say, I created this project. It shows how excited I am to work with organizations like yours, and take a look at it, see what you think of it, and then we could talk about how we might be able to work together. And that's definitely a bigger ask and a bigger play than just sending a quick email to someone. But I think mixing up your strategy of doing something as big and bold as that, and then some other smaller ones where just like let people know who you're trying to work with. If you like them and want to work with them, like don't be afraid to reach out. So next question, how do you balance each of your social media platforms content, and how much time do you usually spend per week? In this stage of my business, social media is not as important to me as it used to be. And I think that's because there's just so many hoops to jump through with the algorithms. So one of the ways that I balance all of this is trying to plan ahead, which sometimes is easier said than done, and sometimes works really well to make it just go really smoothly. In terms of how much time I spend, I have a new alert on my Instagram that tells me when I've been on it for 30 minutes a day. So that's not necessarily my goal to like limit it to 30 minutes, but it's my goal to be conscious of when I hit that time. So I probably spend on average like an hour, and that's posting, that's engaging with other people, that's answering DMs, that's all the different things. But I find that having that like kind of 30-minute warning is helpful to be conscious of like, oh, am I just wasting time on here and don't have a purpose? Or am I making this post and I need to record these videos and share this information about the course? Because if I don't share it with people, they're not going to know about it. They're not going to be able to sign up. So it's a balance of that. And then I think the other big thing I've done in the past year is think more strategically about the different platforms and what you can share on each of them. So it's not going to be the same across the entire thing. And I will fully admit that when I am not on top of my social media game, the same content kind of gets pushed out to Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. But when I really have that organization and I'm kind of in control of things, it will look a lot different, and it will look like me having completely different content on the 3 different platforms because they have a different audience. And then a question from Kurt: have you had to enforce a copyright? If so, how did that go? I haven't really had any issues with enforcing copyrights. In terms of when work has been taken before, usually a message will do what you need it to do. So I have had people share the work on Instagram and never give credit, or just like kind of edit it or do different things, and usually reaching out and saying that you have the copyright or saying that you're the creator even is a good enough indicator or proof that they're going to back off in most cases. I think that when it comes down to it, a lot of the times, if you really do the math on it, it doesn't make sense to like take them to court or do anything more than just that initial warning. Those are obviously things that you could do if it's a bigger situation. But in the smaller situations, I think a lot of times it comes down to educating. People still don't understand that they can't just take your artwork and use it as their own, which of course we're all like, yeah, I don't understand how people don't get that, because it's our artwork, it's not their artwork. But just providing that education and definitely approaching it with that educational mindset of how do I tell this person that they've done something wrong, but not just accuse them and threaten them, but say like, if you didn't know, this is my artwork, here's what you need to do as a result. You can use it if you meet these 3 criteria, or if you are not like able to meet these things, here's what you have to do. You have to take it down, you have to remove this, you can't sell it anymore, whatever it looks like. I think it's just a matter of educating them and making sure that you're really communicating what exactly needs to happen with your artwork. And then another question, so about enrollment for Self-Made Artist Academy. So enrollment is closing on this Thursday, the 11th, and I will be offering it again, but I don't have a set date for the next offering with it. And like I said, I do have that pricing webinar tomorrow, so it will go into all the pricing information, and then I'll also be sharing a little bit more on details for the program. So if you're interested in learning more about it, that's going to be the best option. In terms of when it will open again, I'm not 100% sure, but do plan on launching another cohort of it at least one more time this year. And once again, the program is 6 weeks, but the thing that a lot of people have asked about is that do you have to show up at a certain time? Like my schedule is kind of all over the place the next 6 weeks or so. So the course starts on February 15th, and one time a week, a module with several different lessons in it is going to be sent out to all participants for them to do on their own time within that week. There's a bunch of other bonuses and things involved too, with some extra mini courses and a Facebook group for extra support. So you'll still have access to me as well. But all of that is a bit of more self-paced, but it is stuck to that like 6 weeks that are coming up. So I will be offering it again. The easiest way to know about when exactly that's going to happen is either send me a message to get on my email list, or you can follow me on Instagram or social media in general. That's typically where I'll share first that new courses or other things are launching.
All right, do we have any other last minute questions?
And I just dropped the course information into the chat as well. So if anyone's interested in more details, there's tons of information on that page.
Perfect. Well, always feel free to reach out to Chelsie if you have any follow-up questions, as she said. And thank you everyone for attending Art Club today. A huge thank you to Chelsie Tamms for presenting her amazing work. And be sure to tune in next month, Tuesday, March 9th at 1 p.m. when we host Mark Holmes for a special presentation of their work. Thanks also to the museum members and Visionary Society members for the continued support making a virtual program like this possible. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye now.